I guess first I'll just bore you with this so that you know what kind of a horrible life I've had. No, I'm kidding. I've led a very blessed life. I've been working in the Valley for about 20 years, mostly in data, dealing with data, and most of that data is machine data that came out of a machine as text. And unlike now where we have JSON and YAML and everybody knows how to use it, or at least we hope, back in the day there was no such thing. And in fact, if you look in varlog on any one of your Linux hosts, whoever's ever looked in varlog on their Linux, okay, good. So you know what I'm talking about, right? Truth is that half your stack or more is always going to be like that. And so I got sick of doing the same thing over and over. And I'm here to talk a little bit about that and how that can help for monitoring if we do it a little bit differently. Right, so staring at the abyss is what I call this. And it's always kind of like this because you can never, you can never catch everything in testing, and that's always been the case. One of the companies I used to work at was kind of enterprise storage, and there everything was tested. There was a 1-year release cycle, it would take forever, and still there was problems. We needed to have, back doors to get in with authorization, of course, but to fix things and go look at things. You're never going to catch everything. If you've got one deployment that's going to impact now not just one but thousands of customers or users, that's even more risk. So how can we mitigate that? So this is what we're here to talk about, and this is one of the things I love about feature flags. And I know it's not probably I don't want to, maybe it is for some people. For me, kind of it is one of the most interesting applications, is using it to kind of roll something out and see if it's gonna cause bad effects. And then roll it back. I really like that about feature flags. People do it other ways. There's lots of ways to do it. Canary and rollback, just using your containers and hopes and prayers and monitoring tools. Mesh traffic mixer. Still, you need to monitor though. You need to be looking to see if anything's going wrong, what that is, what's the root cause, is it something I've seen before, that sort of thing. So this is what my point of view really is about, which is I want a tool. It sounds ridiculous, right? Because if you say, I want a tool to help categorize incidents before I notice them, and what I mean by characterize is kind of give me a hint as to, not just like, okay, what containers or nodes or whatever did it happen on, but also a little bit of some sort of information about, okay, here's the things I think are related to what's going on. So over here I see some metric spiking, and over here I see a rare event happened in this log over here, and over here I see a bunch of errors that started spewing at that time, and I want something to show me that, and I want it to come from deep in the bowels of the data. I don't want it to be sort of at such a high level of sort of doubly processed alerts that I then need to go, pull all that information myself. That's what I want, and I'm going to have it. I will have it someday. So that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about. Logs. So I'm back to logs now. Out of curiosity, so how many people here, I know we've all used monitoring tools regularly, how many people actually end up going into logs to find root cause on some issue? Anyone? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's not bad. Okay, cool. So at least for me, sometimes if something's new, if it's a new kind of issue, usually I end up in a log. Maybe that's everyone's experience, or maybe it's half people's experience. But what frustrates me about them is that they're completely unhelpful when it comes to monitoring. It's interesting because I was talking to a guy the other day who was telling me, I can kind of tell when things are going well in my deployment when I'm getting 5,000 alerts from a particular log manager a day versus 10,000. Then I know there's a problem, and that's kind of where we're at. When I started dealing with log data at NetApp 20 years ago to help them build support tools, look at product quality and all that, we used an indexer. You know what we're using today? Mostly indexers. We're searching logs because they're unstructured. They're like documents. And so that's what you do with them. But since we have to end up going and looking into them, doesn't it seem reasonable that there should be a way to extract that monitoring value before I've found that something's wrong and I had to go dig into the logs? So, look, I skipped ahead. I've already said this, but to me, being stuck in index and search is kind of preventing us from going to the next level with logs. This is kind of where things have kind of led to, both kind of in my investigations, as well as there's other companies that are out there looking at doing this. There's a lot of enterprises that have relationally structured their logs, believe it or not. And there's some that have so many different log types and so many different event types in their logs that there is no way they will ever do it. They have completely given up. One giant infrastructure vendor that whose name you would instantly recognize. So when the whole deep learning thing was happening, they went out. I went down. I talked to a guy who's running their he's the technical architect of their support and services area. What they did was when the whole the deep learning thing was going, the DGX1 came out. All the architects and senior engineers in engineering at this company got a brand new DGX1 and 3 months of training in deep learning, and they were told, okay, go figure out how to mull, incidents and customer issues and product quality. Go figure out how to mine that out of our logs. And they gave up after 6 more months because they realized they were spending all their time trying to structure the log data so that the deep learning algorithms could use it. And that's the universal problem with logs. It's hard because formats change, parsers are ambiguous, and you need somebody who knows what they're doing to kind of interpret it and say, oh, is that thing important or is it not important? What does it mean? One thing that's really annoying is if you ever build something on top of the log file, like an alert, what will happen will be the format will change eventually. Someone that you don't know or that doesn't owe you a notification will change the format. They will be helpful and they will fix a spelling mistake. That's what, right? Or maybe they'll add another parameter because it is useful to have that. And what they're thinking when they do it as a developer, they're thinking, okay, when I have to root cause something, I'm going to look at this log. I want that information. How do we build a platform on top of that? Well, we have to structure the data, and then what we have to do is, I'm not going to get too much into the weeds on this, but if you could think of each event type as a table, and maybe it has some parameters, like some numbers, and maybe some volume names or some container names or whatever, interface, whatever it is that the event's talking about. And if you can imagine a table that's named, the normal text in the event, right? Like something bad happened, and then, here's a column with that in it and a column with that in it. And then if you had that structure, and then when the format changed, you had an algorithm that looked and said, this is suspiciously like that other thing. I'm going to add a column to that. I'm going to merge this at the data layer, and I'm going to notify people that I've done that. Then you end up with something that's like a platform you can build monitoring on, and that's what interests me. So I don't want to go too deep into this either, just because it's probably not of interest, but just not, reach out anytime if you want to get into it. But what I would say is, like anything else with dirty stuff, there's a dirty solution required. So there are academic projects that use deep learning directly on log data. There's a lot of work done with LCS. LCS is state-of-the-art, longest common substring. Sometimes it's used in batch, sometimes it's used online, but it requires tuning and tweaking and parameters, and it requires a lot of examples. So none of this is working out well. So what we decided to do was create sort of a Swiss Army knife. So, here's what's interesting. So this is something that I love to tell people because I'm not sure if they're aware of it. But if you look at a typical set of logs, maybe it's a gigabyte or a terabyte, there's only going to be, so let's say maybe 10 to 20% of that will be stuff you only saw 1 to 5 times. Until you get to some vast number that I've never actually accumulated in one place, you will not see everything, because not all code paths are exercised all the time, throughout your stack. And so you need something that's going to work on 1 or 2 examples, using heuristics. And when it gets to 4 examples, it needs to do something more fancy. And when it gets 100, it needs to do something fancier. So it's kind of a complicated problem. But this is kind of what I want to see from a log monitor, right? What I want to see from a log monitor is it's something that kind of notices, okay, I've got my Atlassian, Confluence service here. I've got a Postgres service. And basically what I want to notice is that something rare happened in Postgres just before a bunch of horrible stuff started happening everywhere else. And when that happens, I want it to tell me, right? I want it to say, this happened first, and so that's probably the root cause. And I want to get this before I notice, because all of a sudden there's a ramp in some horrible metric that means everything's on fire, right? As soon as that second few messages come in, I want to be able to say, like I would with my eye, I want to be able to say, my system to be able to say, yeah, this is something to look at, and this is probably why. Go look at it, right? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about where we're at, and then close with a little bit about where I think we're going. So far, I would say that we're the only people doing a lot of this anomalous or autonomous log monitoring stuff. So, what ends up being really valuable is getting data sets. Like you'll work with a company, and they'll have some incidents, and you'll take those, and you'll do stuff and work out bugs, and you'll get better. Right. So right now we're finding root cause in about 56% of the incidents that we have. That's recall. Precision is about 10%. And what that means is, let's say I have an incident a week that I actually should have seen. Then what'll happen is I'll get an alert once or twice a day. That's where we're at now. And I kind of feel like that needs to be driven down by an order of magnitude, but first I'm more interested in getting the 56% up. So what's interesting to me is this problem, it's kind of like sometimes you hear these incredibly talented martial artists talking, and they say, yeah, however you come at it, that expertise, eventually you master something, and you could have gotten to that mastery through any path, but at that point you are a master of something. And what I'm starting to believe is that this same sort of process and sort of logic of let's look throughout the entire cluster, let's find stuff that's going wrong or maybe is weird, and let's correlate it, and let's see if we've got lots of coincidences. And the more data I can get about stuff, the more containers and log types I can get, the more stats I can get, the better a job I can do of squashing noise and finding coincidences. And I think that what we'll see as the future unfolds is, what I want to see is like, smart metrics companies that are out there and looking for anomalies. You're seeing this now. I think they're really noisy in general, but they'll be getting better. And they'll be looking to bring in other kinds of data and do real anomaly detection with it. To me, the future has to look like we don't have to do this ourselves all the time, right? We can let a tool do the work for us and get more strategic about what we're thinking about, like our overall reliability in our architecture, instead of digging into this kind of stuff. Anyway, you're welcome to come give us a ring if you want to be part of that. Otherwise, I'm really grateful to have been a part of this here today. Thank you.